Artists are stupid. You have to understand. Artists one are insane, and then second, they're stupid. You can lock them in a closet and slide paper under the door. They'll slide it out with drawings on it just so they can get more paper.
People would look at it and go, wow, this is cool. I don't know who'd publish it.
It still took 80 phone calls before I got a call back.
My mom tells me I'm really good. What I've really found is that it's hard to get people excited about a creator-owned book from somebody. You know, a lot of people, as much as there's a lot of talk these days about like the creator-owned revolution, when it comes down to it, like the majority of readers would probably, if you have not started your career doing those kind of books, if you've begun your career doing big company characters and you've maybe gotten associated, as I have, with one specific character, you know, people want to see you continue to do that, you know. It's a strange kind of, everybody, you know, complains that not enough people are doing creator-owned work, but then you look at sales for creator-owned books and it doesn't really support that kind of chatter that you hear. Because, you know, if they announce that you're doing another, you know, Batman book, and you know you have an immediate sales base there, you know, you can do the math. I mean, you know how many people will buy it more or less based on books that you sold in the past. And I think that's kind of interesting and scary about doing something creator-owned, is it really means that you kind of like, you know, have to really put your cock on the table, you know, and put out like, you know, put out something that's interesting, because you don't have these characters that people have grown up loving, that they're going to follow. I'm not going to say no matter what, but you know, a lot of people will follow certain characters and because of their passion and love for those particular properties. When you're doing something new, you're rolling the dice, basically, seeing what's gonna stick and what's not. And I think that's interesting. I think it's really interesting.
So let's talk about why it's worth taking that chance.
Because I just feel like I have stories to tell, and I want to kind of do other things. You know, I don't, and I do feel like there's an element of that growing up, you know, at the time period I did in comics. You know, like people like to look back and kind of, you know, lift their nose at Image Comics, and some of it's pretty justifiable. But the one thing I gotta say is, at the time, you know, a lot of guys were creating a lot of new property, and a lot of new ideas were circulating. Not all of them good, but that's okay. I mean, there was a lot of, like, you know, creativity in that period of time, and I think that there's I think that growing up in that period of time, you know, I've always thought about my own stories and my own, you know, had my own ideas, and it's just not easy to get that kind of stuff off the ground and make a living doing it, you know. Yeah. You have to get to a certain point, I think, in your career where you can kind of do that.
And then, I don't know if you want to talk about this or not, but the flip side being, if you work for the big companies, you don't own anything, right?
It's definitely true, but you know, like, even there, I mean, you go into that knowing. I mean, in this day and age, you know that. So, for anybody, I think, later on to kind of bitch and moan and say like, oh, they took my ideas and they took, you know that, you know, none of these characters are mine, that I've worked on, are mine. Even ideas that, you know, Brian and I have had and things that we've come up with, we know they're not ours. It's kind of pointless to bitch and moan, I think, about it. You know the drill. Like, you know, there's years and years of having watched other people kind of go through those kind of, you know, that phase where they're like, oh, you know, Marvel and DC, they fucked me over, and yada, yada, yada. It's like, man, but I bet you liked paying your rent when you were working for them. You know what I mean? I bet it was good to eat, you know? and people like kind of give me shit about that. They're like, oh, you shouldn't just be thinking about, you know, it's not basic survival, it's art, it's creation, you're doing something. But you know, you take some things and you leave others, and that's just the decision you make. It's the same thing when you do, I think, a creator-owned book, you know. You take the risk that, you know, it's going to come out and it's going to, you know, not do anything or not be, you know, successful, and then maybe you're going to wind up back at DC and Marvel. You work for these big companies and you don't own anything, but man, you know, there's a lot of benefits to doing that too. So you just make that decision and you make it consciously. You know? And if you bitch about it later on, I think you're really kind of fooling yourself. At the end of the day,